Hey everybody, welcome to the 1947 Rise podcast, a podcast that helps India-born, US-trained Indians get integrated into the Indian technology ecosystem and inspires them to move back to India to build massive tech companies and or help enable the tech ecosystem. We do this by interviewing India-born, US-trained Indians who have moved back to India and built massive tech companies themselves and or helped enable the tech ecosystem. Today we had Saahil Goel, the co-founder and CEO of Shiprocket. Shiprocket is India's #1 customer experience platform for direct commerce. They're empowering over 2 lakh e-commerce sellers. In this episode, we covered Sahil's journey of growing up in India, then moving to the US, what made him move back to India, the founding story and the thesis of Shiprocket, the company building of Shiprocket, his advice to folks that are thinking about moving back to India, the India opportunity. We also talked about luck, talked about the founders that he admire, and who is the outside of work. It was a lot of fun. All right. I am super excited to have Sahil Goel on 1947 Rise podcast. Sahil, welcome to the show.
Pleasure being here, Shiva. Thanks for having me.
We'll dive right into it. Would love for you to walk us through your journey of growing up in India to moving to the US and then what made you move back to India. And we'll talk about your experiences and biggest takeaways that you got while working in the US.
No, happy to. I think we were just chatting earlier as well. See, while growing up, I had two very strong hobbies, which eventually became passions for me. I was a musician from a very young age. I used to love playing all kinds of instruments. And then as early as I think maybe I was in eighth grade or something, I got a computer, the 386 UGA monitor. You guys won't even know what it is. But and I was amazed, like, what you could do. I started to explore, whatever I could very early on. And then by early sort of actually 1998, 99, not even 2000s, I was already coding in HTML, just figuring out what JavaScript meant. And then by the time I left school, I was able to write full-blown websites, and that kind of was very intriguing because in some ways it was also a way to satisfy my creative pursuit. You can build something, and then others can look at it, appreciate it. You can create something. And I think that was pretty interesting. And that stayed with me more or less. I kept, while of course my first 5 or 6 years of my professional career weren't about the internet. I always stayed in the product development side of things. My first job was with Max Life, where I was one of the product managers there, helping them externalize their intranet, their agent portal. They were opening it up to the web for the first time. So what were the various things that needed to be done? We, in fact, even took Max's India products to other parts of New York Life, like Thailand, where one of the targets our CTO or CIO rather had given us was to make IT a profit center. So kind of built some of those products, externalize them, a very interesting journey, and then had a chance to kind of move to the US and study my MBA and my MS. After that, I think, I think somewhere along the line during my MBA, the whole I want to start my business thoughts started to come into my head, but I had no idea like what and how and where. I had no clue. So obviously I kept thinking about it. I started reading about other businesses, other entrepreneurs, what's happening in tech. But I had no way to make it happen. So one of the options I had after my B school, I actually was working there with Bear for about a couple of quarters, and then there was an option to join a financial services consulting startup almost, which was back in India, which was going to do new age consulting on deep tech for the financial services industry. So I jumped on it. just given the view on, I'd love to know what it's like to work at a brand new company. When you're employee number 3 or 4, what does it feel like, right? So I moved back, did that for about a year and a half, ended up, consulting for Religare. Again, similar role. I was still doing product
Yeah.
analysis or development, working with the tech, working with the business, and kept constantly trying to, figure out that idea because it had already seeped into my head. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's that it takes a bit of a leap to say,
Yeah.
what do I do? I need to know what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uske baad, I kind of got another option to go back to the US, work at Highmark. I just gotten married, so needed some level of stability, you know. So kind of moved back to the US. My wife was there at the time, and then ended up working at Highmark for almost just under 2 years, or maybe slightly less.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, I think somewhere in my head, I was constantly thinking about this more and more. It had now been 3, 4 years I was thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
I actively started looking for ideas to say, look, I can't do this. I have to start my venture. And for me, starting the venture was at that time more important than what it was. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh, I faced this problem, and that's how a lot of the startup stories go. But the reality is, for me, my problem was I didn't want to be in a job.
Yeah.
That was my problem, right? And I literally, went through a series of ideas, spent about 2 years. Luckily, I had a friend from undergrad, Gotham, who was in a similar space in his head. So it
Mm-hmm.
became now not just my problem, but the two of us were now in a, we were together in this project to say, look, we gotta find our next jobs. Well, Gotham I met in undergrad, but we now had sort of this mission, and we were not experimenting, I guess, but studying all kinds of things. India's wedding industry, from recycling, e-waste in electronics, like you name it, right? Printer cartridge refilling. Is there a better tech to doing this? And I think over the years of doing this, I actually the spark for me was seeing Shopify, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Shopify, that time they were still sort of big, but not what they are today.
Mm-hmm.
And being a developer or a web developer, I understood e-commerce is happening. I saw what Amazon's doing. India was still pretty early, right? India still had Jungly, and Flipkart was kind of there. They had
Yeah.
just become slightly more than a bookstore. I'm talking about that time. Uh, for me, it was like an instant click, just saying, "Oh, India's got so many SMEs." I had interned at Walmart for a little bit, so I had that perspective on big box retailing versus independent business, what Walmart did to the market, and etc., etc. And that just connected in my head, saying, "Look, I know how to build websites. This is a beautiful product, which is just simplifying this job for anyone. Anyone can just now upload a few pictures and
Mm-hmm.
they take care of the rest. It's not the traditional enterprise way of publishing websites. So we got to do this for India, and I think that's it. Like that, we locked down on that. And obviously, before that, I had given we had a life there. My wife and I were both working there. We had literally just started our lives there, which it is a time when people think about career growth, buying a house. Um, Generally speaking, for me, actually, before this, the first thing I thought about very hard is, can I not just do it here?
Yeah.
Can't I just be here and, incorporate a company and figure out a way to employ myself or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but just the whole visa, situation, and you've lived in the US too, you can't do it on an H1B. Like you just can't. You need a person to sponsor it. And I'm sure as a zero employee startup, you can't sponsor yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm sure there's rules around it. And that just seemed like a big blocker, to say, look, this is just hard. If we live here with no income, anyway, we can't support ourselves. It's just too expensive.
Yeah.
Um, so after a lot of obviously convincing my wife, Gautam was already in India. I was there. We ran the company for 6 months, just remote, whatever, through VoIP calls at the time. And then eventually, we said, look, we got to move back. Like I really want to do this. And I think India is going to have a huge potential for this at some point. And even if not, I still want to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of how it happened. And then I just moved back, like without a business plan, without anything. We had just done a
Yeah.
bunch of discussions. We had done some research, but that was it. For both Gautam and I, it was really about saying, look, we gotta start something,
Yeah.
and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So and I know other people who've done it differently. They've kind of really researched it well.
Yeah.
They knew what they were getting into. It wasn't the case with us. For us, it was just about getting the momentum going, and then we'll see where it takes us. Kind of an attitude.
Got it. So, you're the core reason, or one of the biggest reasons, was, okay, hey, I can be working for someone else. Let me, I want to build something and work for myself. So that was there. And then it was also a function of, your experience at Walmart, seeing Shopify booming in the US. And then, of course, you took the plunge. And I guess it took you, what, 10 years to get to an overnight success. So let's double click on that, Sahil. What was the founding story slash initial thesis of Shiprocket? I think there were 4 5 pivots. And then we'll talk about where are we today and what's the magical outcome that you see for Shiprocket moving forward.
No, no, happy to talk about that, Shiva. So I think the macro thesis has not changed, and that's one of the reasons we are still somewhat, I would say, successful. Because the macro thesis was that, there's going to be horizontal marketplaces like Amazon, and they will take a share of the market. They'll push the market forward. But India's got these 50 million independent businesses. India has more employment in self-employment than in professional employment,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's something different about India, and that's always been the case. And that is where, I think the view that, look, big box retail is not going to disrupt this, because we are a very high touch, low trust, touchy feely, personalized kind of market,
Mm-hmm.
demographically very, very different. India's got so many Indias within it, that we
Mm-hmm.
just felt that it's not gonna be like the US.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not going to be like the US in the offline market, it's probably not going to be the same in the online market either. So
Mm-hmm.
people will need ways to sell directly to their consumer, right? Whether they are a small retailer or a big brand or whatever it is, they are going to need the toolkit of e-commerce to be able to sell direct. And
Mm-hmm.
they will always sell through every channel, but they will also need this, and this will be an important channel in India.
Yeah.
So that thesis has not changed. We continue to kind of stay and believe in that thesis. Of course, the products that we tried to solve that problem, I guess, those have changed drastically, right? So when
Yeah.
we launched the company year one, we basically, like I said, heavily inspired by Shopify, with some tweaks of our own for India, which I'll talk about, which are interesting. But heavily inspired by Shopify, dumb it down, make it simple. A lot of principles, that we kind of picked up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Built the platform. Took us about a year to launch, completely bootstrapped, right, by now. And we launched it, and then we found that it wasn't selling, like it was too early, right? Because either we had the larger companies or enterprises or brands who liked it, but they wanted us to do it for them, like they wanted us to customize everything, because that was the nature of the market,
Yeah.
right? That's how the market existed. So we
Mm-hmm.
did do some of that, because gaadi to aage badhani hai. So we kept doing what we could, but really our heart was in scaling the platform, because that's what we had set out to do. And actually, it was pretty good, because we did get the early adopters. We got about 1,000 merchants who were their own visionaries and evangelists of the time. In fact, you'll be surprised, out of our initial customers, there's so many of them that are still doing well, that are still on the platform,
Yeah.
right, from that time, because they were the sort of OGs of this D2C market,
Yeah.
in some ways, right? And they pushed the platform forward, to be honest, right? They kind of helped us scale and survive, or whatever you want to call it. And then over some time, we started really thinking hard about distribution and the business model, because our business model was a subscription based model, right? Wanting to be like a US company, wanting to be a pure internet company.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but we were not really that, because eventually we were doing a lot of services. We had to build the website for the merchant.
Yeah.
There was very heavy churn, because a lot of merchants would try, they would come on board, but then there was no way for them to get demand, because the Facebook and Google ad ecosystem had not grown up that much till that time. So in that sense, we were early, right?
Yeah.
Because then when you don't get any traffic or orders, we're not going to renew. We're like,
Yeah.
well, I made no business. You guys did a good job, but my
Mm-hmm.
business isn't working. So I'm gonna quit. So we were not finding the way to say, well, how do I scale this? And I know that there are tons of businesses out there. So what do we do? So I think what we ended up doing is studying a lot of other platforms. We looked at OLX and we looked at Facebook pages. There's a new thing back then where every business was publishing a Facebook page, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or OLX Pay, everybody was able to make a listing. And then we started thinking that, look, these guys are not calling them or doing it for them, right? People are just doing it. So maybe our tech is just too complicated. Maybe it just needs to dumb down even more
Yeah.
than what Shopify did in the US. Maybe the Indian merchant is much more like a consumer, right? And that's our problem. So we actually tried a pilot. We used to be called Cart Rocket back then, and the
Mm-hmm.
pilot was called Cart Rocket Studio, where we said, okay, let's go after all the boutiques, and then studio, and let's give them a mobile app instead of doing this desktop kind of thing. Let's give them a mobile app. Let them take a picture. We connected their Instagram feed so they could also import their gallery from Instagram. Let them write only one line for their product and not like a SEO description,
Yeah.
and let's give them a shipping and a payment ready site, and like let's just do it, and see what happens. So that was the first time we truly kind of tasted, scale,
Yeah.
because now we had a mobile app that we could market, right? People would download it. They would suddenly we saw like in a matter of a quarter, we had like 10,000 merchants, who had uploaded their catalog, because it was free too. Let me also mention that, because we said, let's not charge anything, because we'll never know where the problem is. And think of it like an experiment or a pilot, and maybe we'll charge them a 20% on sales if they make a sale,
Yeah.
right? So we did that. Of course, nobody made any sales, and they all just got a bunch of free websites. But what it told us is that it really taught us a lot of things. That look, we can get to the merchants. There is a latent demand. They don't want to pay for it upfront. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want to go on the desktop, and it's got to be dead simple. Then it will work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously from there we kind of said, okay, well, for us to make money, we have to get demand.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we don't make any money. So we built a simple Facebook ads engine. So we were actually publishing ads on Facebook
Yeah.
from their catalog,
Yeah.
that we then manage the bids and whatnot, and we started to make some money on that. And eventually we kind of pivoted that and called it Craftly, because we
Mm-hmm.
were we were running both the businesses. We still had Cart Rocket and we had Craftly. So we pivoted that. It kind of ended up becoming like a marketplace towards the end, because eventually what was happening is people said, I don't want to pay for the ad. You bring the traffic, then charge me commission. And we said, well, that's the marketplace. Like but that's what the market wanted. They didn't want tools. They wanted business. They wanted dhanda. So we did that because we still kind of believed in our cause that, let's be selective on the seller side. Let's bring the long tail, long tail, long tail. And at one point, Craftly had like 15, 20, 25,000 active sellers per month who were receiving at least an order or so, right? So we did achieve some parts of our objective. We scaled the uh, transaction volume to a couple of 100,000 a month, which was pretty big at that time. Seems small now. And as we were on that journey of growing orders, we realized that, we always had shipping as a layer, by the way, from day zero. Even
Mm-hmm.
CartRocket had a very simple shipping interface because, and I forgot to mention this earlier, and this is what was different between us and Shopify, right? Shopify was initially a pure web internet service, right?
Yeah.
But India is always different. Like we'd go to merchants and they'd be like, well, how do I collect COD?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, don't you have an account? They're like, no. How do
Mm-hmm.
we get an account?
Yeah.
So we said, okay, let us find out. So we'd go back to the carriers and say, look, these guys want an account. And can you give it to them? And they said, no. We said, why? Because we only want to work with the large guys and they're too small. So there was a big catch 22 because and that time India was 90% COD.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So the
wow.
merchant's thinking, well, how do I start without having the account? And the carriers are saying, well, you need volumes to get an account. So what do I do? So what we said, okay, you know what? Let me take an account.
Yeah.
And let me get like 10 of these guys under this thing. And then maybe it'll be meaningful. And then I'll get 100 more. So it's a great way for you to build business. So we had to do some convincing on the carrier end, even for that. But we finally got, and I won't name them, got one of the guys to start working with us.
Yeah.
early on, right? And then
Yeah.
of course over time, as volumes became more real, then
Yeah.
everyone wanted to work with us. Um, so that stayed with, we had that. It was just a little feature or service. It was not really a product or anything, right? But
Yeah.
it was there. And then as we went into Craftly, we obviously needed to now build it because we now had, a potential of doing 10, 20,000, then 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 orders a month. So we needed to kind of have a good supply chain solution. And obviously Amazon did it a certain way. They just went and they started investing, Amazon, Flipkart, both in the ground supply chain. We did not want to do it. One, it was not our strength. So what we did instead is, we went to all of the 3PLs that were already servicing the likes of Amazon and told them, look, we are a young company, but we will grow and we need your support. We need you to help us build these things for us, either in the form of APIs or because we can't do the ground investments, but here's what our merchants need. Our
Mm-hmm.
merchants are long tail. Their problem is pickup, not last mile. We have heavy COD, more than Amazon. We need support with RTO. What data points can you share with us so we can improve our order volumes and so on? So we
Mm-hmm.
kind of worked hand in hand with them. And over time, we ended up started building a ton of workflows at our end to manage the merchant side of things. COD reconciliation, prediction around, which orders are likely to get RTO versus not. So I think having done a lot of that stuff, after a couple of years of running it, a lot of our merchants started writing to us saying, you know what, I do 50, 100 orders on your platform, but I have another 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to ship through you
Yeah.
only. I don't want to do the rest. I only want to ship because my shipping sucks. And, at first we did not pay a lot of attention because it was like maybe distraction. Let's focus on the full platform and this and
Mm-hmm.
that. But then one thing is our platform itself wasn't like, we weren't sure ki, are we becoming another Amazon because we don't want to. Our vision was very much intact that we want to help the long tail or the SMB run their business on their terms.
Mm-hmm.
But the more we try to scale our platform, the more we found we were going away from that vision because the incentives don't stay aligned. The moment you say, I'm going to take commissions,
Mm-hmm.
one guy can give you more commissions than the other. And then suddenly your incentives are to favor only one guy. So
Yeah.
how do you get everyone to win on the platform? And that's a incredibly hard problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we that was starting to play up in our heads a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And at the same time, we had all of these merchants, saying that can I just ship? So we said maybe we've done something on shipping. बहुत लोग कह रहे हैं. Let's kind of take a deeper look. And one of our brainstorms, one thing that came out was, well, let's just carve out the shipping product as a platform and let Craftly also use that, but let other people also use it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just carve it out. And maybe we've done something interesting. People are saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2016, half a co-founder, five developers, or whatever, we kind of made a scratch team and said, let's try this, right?
Yeah.
And now retrospectively, I can tell that a lot of our learnings, us samay to it was very obvious and trivial. But now when I see the sort of zoom out on the
Yeah.
timeline and I look at what we had built, it's actually phenomenal because we had taken 6, 7 years of what we had learned and
Yeah.
it was built back into the app. It seemed obvious then because
Yeah.
we were in the thick of it. But the fact that it was mobile first, the fact that we knew we would have a collection problem, so let's make it a prepaid shipping wallet. Let's not chase people around. Let's make it chat support only. So we only attract the more, I guess, more aware folks.
Yeah.
We don't want a long tail.
Yeah.
And we fully built it in, and it was built. The language was what merchants understood.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had been dealing with them for a while. We
Mm-hmm.
understood their pain areas. So our comms, GTM, marketing was spot on. And we
Mm-hmm.
didn't know this. I'm just telling you now, right? When I think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And we launched it, and in 6 months, like we couldn't believe our eyes, right? We had metrics that we had not seen before. And we're like, okay, maybe it's just a fluke. Let's give it 6 more months.
Yeah.
And by the time we hit like mid 18 or whatever, it was bigger than everything else we were running,
Yeah.
much bigger. So
Yeah.
we ended up just saying, you know what, let's just kill everything else. Let's only focus here. There
Yeah.
seems to be a big gap when it comes to shipping.
Mm-hmm.
People have figured out their demand on Facebook and Google. There's the likes of Shopify and so on to help them with the catalog. There's payments now available easily, but when it comes to shipping, there is no 5-minute plugin to say just put me on.
Mhm.
I'll I'm your internet shipping guy. I'll take care of your workflows. I'll take care of your pricing. It just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we ended up capturing. And of course, after that is the Shiprocket journey. But I thought it's important to talk about how we got there and how our Uber mission to say that we have to help them sell direct. Because
Mhm.
had we given that up and just pivoted into
Yeah.
something completely different, we would have missed this
Yeah.
entirely.
Yeah. So there's a common thread that I see here, Sahil. For you, it has been okay, let's have a magical outcome in mind and then work backwards.
Yeah.
A framework that you used while you were in the US, and then when you were in India, you had the similar. Okay, so now let's seek inspiration from Shopify and then work backwards and build things around what works in India. If you look back in hindsight, Sahil, what were the traits or frameworks you had in mind that really worked for you and the team at Shiprocket to keep on figuring it out, and then eventually now you've reached that escape velocity. Did you had some frameworks in mind?
Yeah, framework, I don't know, but I'll
Mhm.
tell you there were a set of tenets almost that we kind of um, guardrails maybe, right? That we focus on very hard. And some of them are like at every step in our journey, those got evolved as well. Because you also mature as an individual, you mature as an organization, and
Yeah.
you get better at a few things. But I'll tell you what was clear to us, the fact that we actually didn't, when we launched the company, we were not trying to build a startup.
Hmm.
We were trying to build a business,
Yeah.
right? Just saying, when we launched it, the idea was that in 1.5, 2 years, we'll break even, and then that's it. We'll just split the profit, right? But along the way, we said, oh, wait. There's all this stuff happening. VC naam ka bhi kuch hota hai. We didn't even know.
Yeah.
I'm talking like 2011, 12. And then usame, the venture ecosystem was also like, it's very, very young, right?
Yeah.
So I think not knowing actually helped us because our DNA was always ki boss dhanda hai. You have to make
Mhm.
money.
Yeah.
There is no money to seed you. There is nobody else's money available,
Yeah.
right? And when we got it, we still, until date, we still think that in the company that it's fine, we got to invest smartly, but it's a business, right? It's gotta make money. If it doesn't make money, it's worthless, and we could be wrong, but that's our DNA. And I
Hmm.
think that stayed because that's how we started. So automatically the first set of employees, that's what they did. The next set of employees, so it just kind of carries on and you automatically attract that within the company. And that I think has been a very, very common thread throughout where we would be very clear about how does it make money. It's a very important question. And if it didn't make money in 6 months, 12 months of investment, it gets killed for sure. Right. We will not have something just 5 years down the line. That's just not our DNA.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing was to not be afraid of innovating, because innovating, especially with tech, because a lot of times what will end up happening is you'll find yourself saying it's not possible
Yeah.
to do this because of XYZ. Nahi ho sakta, here's why. And I think that comes from a place of looking in the rear view mirror. But the reality is that look, this is you're assuming these constraints today. So you
Hmm.
have to go to a more futuristic way of thinking, saying, okay, aaj nahi ho sakta,
Hmm.
but if these things change, to possible hai.
Yeah.
And then you got to stick to it then, right? And then you keep building. It
Yeah.
works only 10%, but you still do it.
Yeah.
Slowly becomes 20%. So it's nothing happens like it doesn't happen like that, right? You have to
Yeah.
just stay at it. So
Yeah.
there are processes within our shipping business, which they were broken from day one,
Hmm.
right? And it's a dependent process where, let's say, as a merchant, you send a packet. It's you say it's half a kilo, the carrier says it's 2 kilos, and now we don't know in between saying, okay, well, who's right or who's wrong. So there's
Hmm.
no real 100% way to solve it unless we see the packet, right? But so the answer is, well, we can't do it. But the reality is, well, we can do something, right? And then we started to kind of innovate on, as one example, on saying that, okay, can I look at their historical data, right? Can I read what they are selling? Are they selling jewelry or is it shoes? I mean, can I do some machine learning and figure out what are they selling, and then do a scrape on Amazon and say, okay, well, what do shoes generally weigh, right?
Mhm.
So at least I can take away some part of the dissonance here,
Yeah.
right? And then you keep on, and you can kind of come to a pretty good answer. So if the problem was a 30% spread problem, today it's a 6% spread problem, right? Still
Mhm.
there. But the point is, it's a series of tech innovations that have happened to actually make it a product or a feature. So I think that you'll find many such examples within the company where for us it was always saying, well, can I solve it with tech? Even if it doesn't get solved today. So you really have to build it for the future. Um, and I think those were the only two ones where I would tell you these are consistent
Yeah.
from day one to today, which is saying,
Mhm.
look, keep innovating on tech and then make sure that you know it's going to make money. It's not just a experiment or a pipe dream, right? I
Yeah.
think the third and very important one, which completely changed our company, was happened after our second pivot, because it's a pretty low time, right? When you almost want to give up because you're like, well, maybe my job was better. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. It's not working. It's not scaling. I'm a loser, right? You kind of have all that negative voice in your head. And I think two things that, one is this sort of like, and this is like, I credit my co-founding team and me to some extent for this, where it's like, yaar, we can't die. No matter what,
Yeah.
marna nahi hai. Can't
Yeah.
go back.
Yeah.
Option nahi hai, right? So that is very important because when you don't die, then you're around to try for another day, right? Otherwise, you just die.
Yeah.
So I think that the fact that our entire team was
Yeah.
in the same boat, कि यार कुछ भी हो जाए, we have to be alive, right? That really helps because then everyone's aligned, everyone's helping you. Versus, if one guy is saying it, other three are like, छोड़ यार, इससे अच्छा मेरी opportunity cost जा रही है, मैं consulting कर लेता, कुछ भी हो सकता है, right? So
Yeah.
that really helped me, right? Us rather, कि अच्छा यार option ही नहीं है, option
Mhm.
ही नहीं है, तो फिर what do you do,
No plan B.
right? And the
Uh,
second thing, sorry, was largely focused around saying that, look, we don't, like, somebody actually told me this and then it stuck with me, that right now you're everything to all kinds of people, because we're doing a little bit of everything, right?
mhm.
Really, you want to be one thing to a one segment of people,
Mhm.
and you need to be really good at it.
Mhm.
Start there and then think about expanding. So I think that
Yeah.
the way to build a business, you don't know it, like, and for me that was like, oh wow, I've never thought about it this way. And that really gave us a focus of saying, just sab kuch band kar do,
Yeah.
let's just do this. Even
Yeah.
if it's a smaller number of customers, at
Yeah.
least the business is going to be sustainable and viable,
Yeah.
versus us trying all these sort of sporadic things, spread out across various merchants.
Yeah. Man, so many learnings here. And yeah, I mean, focus on building real business, stay at it long enough.
Yeah.
You'll eventually get what you deserve. And that's where, you're heading towards. We'll switch gears here, Sahil. You moved back in 2011, and we were just talking about it, where you said VCs and, angels, these things were unheard of. And you moved back at a time where people would not move back, like they would actually stay back in US and just build a better life there. But now fast forward to today, 2022, things have changed drastically. And a lot of people are actually, taking a note of this, and they are planning and they're thinking about moving back to India. What advice would you give, advice or framework, how to think about, let's say, of moving back to India and the India opportunity?
I think it's there's no better time. This is India's next 2 decades, and if you, this is where the world's actions happening now, right? Forget VC in general. Look at what's happening with our economy and India. Like today's India is not they. I was telling somebody the other day that our kids, like my kids, they are not growing up saying bad things about India. They are growing up saying, oh, we rock, and to some extent we grew up where we were a little bit cynical that, oh, we don't have this, now they're saying, okay, look how we are winning. So when you have this workforce 10 years later, imagine what it'll do, because
Yeah.
for them this is the best place in the world, right? So I think it's a phenomenal time for all kinds of reasons. That's just one of them. From a capital availability perspective, it's if you're in tech, any kind of tech, right? There's this cycle that I've observed, and I've talked about it often. So we've gone through this. Let's talk about FDI in general, right? We started with doing only KPO, right? Which is saying, okay, let's outsource a bunch of these mechanical jobs to India.
Mm-hmm.
Let's let them pick up our calls. They speak English, cheap, right? Over time, it became more business process, right? Then it became more tech outsourcing. That okay, let's outsource our tech needs to this, workforce. Then it became about X of Y companies. When the startup wagon kind of, we were an X of Y company when we launched Shopify of India, right? FedEx of India. So I think what's happening now, right, is actually that's not what's happening now. In the last, I think maybe 3 to 4 years, people have built ground up problems, right? Solutions for ground up problems which are only in India. If you talk about Shiprocket, or you talk about Oyo, or you talk about Zeroda, I mean there's so many examples which are done for India. Those problems probably do exist elsewhere as well,
Yeah.
but they have not been solved there. They are solved here first.
Yeah.
And when they are getting solved, they are able to scale it. They are getting the capital to scale it. And many of them are now getting exported, right, to other parts of the world to say that, oh, you know what, we solved it in India. What about Southeast Asia, US, Europe, Australia? They would have a similar problem too. So it's actually, in a way, it's going all the way back where it's from India being at the receiving end of the innovation. I think India is today at the creative end of the innovation, and then that gives you tremendous power and IP, and it's a perfect place to do that because the capital is there, the government loves it,
Mm.
right? The government's completely behind this. You get look at what they've done with ULIP. I don't know if you followed that, but
Mm.
I went to the launch. They have now some 30, 40 APIs,
Mm.
right? Which are the government's APIs, right? So you can track vehicles, you can check customs form. It's crazy. So,
Mm.
and they want other startup developers to build on top of it to push the ecosystem forward. So I think there's just I can go on about this, but the reality is, first of all, think about your opportunity cost, right?
Yeah.
You have a job in the US, depending on your life stage. Of course, those are very personal choices. But if you want to move back and start or even work with a startup, right now, even those options are there at large. Uh, there is no better time because this will 20 years later, this inflection will not be there, right?
Yeah.
I think this is the time to really capitalize on the trend and go for it.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And in fact, Sahil, recently I saw, a startup at YC saying, we are building Shiprocket for X,
Oh, was it?
Udan for X. We're building, again, like Oyo, and this is the trend that we are seeing, right? Um, and I think I'll share the link with you. Harsha Bogle actually recently he spoke about what New India is, and I think one can relate, India and India's culture to cricket and observe that. So what he said, 15, 20 years back, when there's a batsman on the on the pitch, he'll think about, hey, I'll think about going for 4 or 6, but what if I get out, right? Versus he talks about today, Pandya or the new guys. They talk about what if I hit 6, the possibilities. Now they're thinking about okay, to sum it up, I would say we've been on the back foot. Now we're on the front foot, and this is the
No, no,
trend.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and that's such a beautiful way to capture it. It's truly what India has become, and it's still early days, for this version of India. So that
Yeah.
is why it's so exciting.
Yeah. And so we'll switch gears here, Sahil. At the later part of the podcast, my co-pilot Alfonso, he gets in and he gets to ask questions. So his first
Cool.
one is, how much of the success that you have gotten so far you would attribute to luck, and why?
It's a good one. See, I think I do believe in luck. Let me be honest, because I don't think anything is possible without having external help from someone, right? now, at the same time, I do think that if you're not prepared, right, and if you're not constantly, uh, if you don't want it bad enough, then you miss that opportunity. You just want, because you have to. It's really about probability. If you
Mhm.
want it bad enough, you are going to take every opportunity that comes your way because
Yeah.
you want it bad enough, and then one of them will work, and you say, "Oh, I got lucky." But the reality is that I've also noticed in life, people say, "Oh, that guy is lucky," or "this guy is not." What I've found is everyone is lucky in certain areas, right? So I do think it is here where you really want something, and you basically keep churning it over and over and over again, and one of them works, and then you feel lucky. So, but that's, again, I don't want to get into the philosophy of it. I would say a large part of it is timing. It's about us making the right choices. It's about India and the opportunity that it avails, and we don't control any of that in many ways. Our job is to execute better, to work harder, to keep delivering, right? So I would say it's a equal attribution of luck versus us kind of making it happen.
Yeah. And a founder entrepreneur in India that you admire, uh, who is that person? It has to be outside of Shiprocket, and why?
Yeah, so I actually admire a lot of founders, and I'll name a few who've kind of made a personal sort of impact. So Pearl Uppal and Gaurav Kachru of Fashion in You, they were early investors. They really helped us shape up in the early days. Rajan Mehra, who's a continuing investor, was a founder at Bazi, Bidobai, and then Bazi, then ran eBay, then became a VC. All of these guys were like our early helpers. Piyush Bansal at Lenskart, he was an early helper. We never got involved commercially or formally, but we till date would go back to him for mentorship and advice. And then over years, as I got to meet, and there's obviously you can admire from far away, but
Mhm.
then there's people who have an impact and people who you meet. I think more recently, I got a chance to meet and now work with Dipinder at Zomato. And honestly speaking, I don't think there is a more high quality entrepreneur than him, like just in every aspect of being able to run a business, scale a business, build a culture, and truly build a movement. If you ask me, it's phenomenal what he can do and what he's been able to do. And in many ways, I look up to him for that now. And again, like I said, there's people who you meet and you can kind of really interact, exchange ideas, and then there's folks where you can obviously learn from other people's mistakes as well as from their success. But within the folks that I have been able to meet and have a much more direct way of having an impact, I can't think of anybody else but him.
Yeah, love it. And Sahil, we know you because of a tech entrepreneur, co-founder of Shiprocket. What do your friends know you for? Who are you outside of work?
So different people will know me for different things. I'm a, I guess, used to be an avid musician. I play the guitar, I sing. Not as much now, but used to be very, very passionate. There was a time in my career, in my life, where I wanted to do it full time. I wanted to make that my career, but then obviously couldn't really make that plunge. But they know that that a lot of people who know me know that I love to sort of create music. Um, yeah, other than that, I'm a family guy. I've got two kids, 5 and 10. I try and spend as much time as I can with them when I'm at home. And
Mhm.
I love traveling. I absolutely love it. I love trekking, anything outdoors. Mixed with travel is completely my cup of tea. Every time I'll get an opportunity, I'll try to travel. um, that's it. I'm a fairly low maintenance guy otherwise.
Love it, Sahil. I had so much fun on the pod. Thank you so much for making the time, coming on the pod, and really walking us, through your journey so far and talking about the India opportunity. Really appreciate you for that.
No, thank you so much, Shiva, and I enjoyed every bit of it. Thanks for having me, Yash.